The political dimension of relations between Nigeria and the European Union is articulated in Article 8 to 13 of the revised Cotonou Partnership Agreement. In 2009, the European Union and Nigeria formalized the commitments in the form of the Nigeria-EU Joint Way Forward. In that agreement, the EU and Nigeria resolved to intensify political dialogue and to hold at least a yearly senior officials meeting and a ministerial dialogue. The main areas identified for the dialogue include peace and security, good governance, human rights, economic sustainability, and climate change. Given Nigeria's influence in Africa and at international fora, it was also agreed that the dialogue should cover regional and international cooperation in addition to the domestic situation. On the program Diplomatic Ties, we will take you through the European Union-Nigeria economic and trade relations, the electoral and public governance inclusive. My guests is the ambassador and the head of the European Union delegation to Nigeria and the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. He is His Excellency Ketil Karlsen. That will be the focus on the program today. After this time, stay with us. Welcome to Diplomatic Ties.
And we're doing our best to make it as convenient and easy as possible for prospective students.
What we can do is just support the efforts of West African countries to integrate, to organize a better regional, political and economic integration.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Diplomatic Ties, building friendship and enhancing oneness among nations. Watch Diplomatic Ties on NTA International.
When you got your posting to Nigeria, given the information you had then and now, what were your feelings?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on Diplomatic Ties. I must say I admire your program very much, and I think it's a very important platform for the dialogue that the international community and the Nigerians have on diplomatic issues. So it's wonderful to be here, and hopefully it will not be the last time during my tenure here.
Definitely.
But I must say I came quite well prepared to Nigeria, so I think diplomats should be careful not only to get their information on Google and what they can get on the surface from media. So I spoke to a lot of people that I knew in advance and Nigerians that I've met in the past also. So I think I came with a quite good idea of Nigeria. So if anything has changed, it is really the overwhelming richness of the culture here. Traveling around the country, I'm again and again surprised by just how multi-layered and rich and old and complex the culture is here. So this is a wonderful surprise, I must say. I knew I would be visiting a very big country. I knew I would be dealing with very qualified and skilled people, because I met Nigerians in my career before. Some of the most difficult negotiations I've had is with Nigerians, and I mean this positively, because in diplomatic relations you need to have a strong hand also when it comes to negotiating international deals. So I know that the people here are extremely capable, and this is exactly what my experience here up until now has demonstrated. We need to be on our toes as diplomats in Nigeria, because our counterparts are top level, whether with the authorities, civil society, businesses, and I think this is wonderful. That is really what is making this a great challenge.
Okay, 2019 is a crucial year for Nigeria. A lot to say. They call it an electoral year, an election year. So much politicking, and the EU in the last few months or last few weeks has done so much within the electoral governance platform. What informed this, and so far, what's the volume in terms of commitment has the EU done preparing Nigeria for the 2019 elections?
Yes. As you know, the EU is engaged on so many different levels, but I must say that our engagement on elections is really a flagship amongst flagships in many ways. And this is one of the platforms where our political partnership with Nigeria becomes most evident. So the EU has observed the elections here at every general election since 1999, and that demonstrates a clear long-term commitment. So this is not something that we just do a couple of months ahead of the elections. It's actually an ongoing engagement for the consolidation of democracy. And let me say right away that it is not about imposing European ways of doing business. The consolidation of democracy within our own borders has not finalized either. So this is a partnership where we engage with Nigeria just as Nigeria will engage with Europe. But in order to do that well, we need to work with all the key stakeholders, and that is fundamentally what we are doing here. Altogether, since 1999, we have invested more than 100 million euros in electoral processes and democratic governance in Nigeria. That is maybe small compared to the national engagement and budgets on this, but it's nevertheless a quite significant support. And as we're speaking, we are now again implementing a very significant program of support of 26.5 million euros, where we support INEC, of course, but we also support the National Assembly. We support the civil society in their work, in their promotion of participation of women, participation of youth, big challenges around those two very important groups to get them engaged and involved in politics, having doors open more to them, and having disabled people participate more. One of the things that really make me proud is a world first EU support for the Albino Foundation here in Nigeria.
Is that coming up?
That has already started.
Okay.
In October last year, the European Parliament made a resolution to say European delegations should support more the work of albinos throughout Africa, and I'm happy to say that
So
here in
Nigeria is captured?
Nigeria is the first, and already we see very impressive results
What's the
of that.
financial commitment of this?
Well, it's a rather modest. It's within the wider and broader support, but sometimes it's not only about the size of the funding, but actually about the results that you can achieve.
What's the timeline like? How many years?
This is for a couple of years.
Okay,
So,
like
so
1 year?
yes, a year and a half, 2 years. So demonstrating again that if you want to work with elections, it's not only about election day. It's about what you do between elections. It's what you do before. It's gearing up. It's partnering. It's providing technical assistance. We have the European Center for Electoral Support here.
Quite exciting. If by chance maybe the democratic governance in Nigeria failed, would this assistance, will it still be there?
Well, I mean, if the
Because you said
democratic
from 1999 to
Yeah.
date.
No, I
and
mean,
that's
we-
because we have had an unbroken democracy till date,
Yeah.
hitting almost 18 years now.
I mean, if democratic governance in Nigeria would fail, that would be a disaster for Nigeria, for Africa, and beyond, and definitely for Europe also. I like to say that what is good for Nigeria is good for Europe, and that may sound a bit simplistic, but nevertheless, there's a lot of truth to that. So maintaining unity, having a consolidation of democracy in Nigeria at a point in time where, of course, the population growth here is mind-boggling, as some would say. I mean, in speeches in Europe, I've mentioned to people from my own country, Denmark, that over the next decade or two, Nigeria is foreseen to grow with the size of my own country every year. So in order to find jobs, in order to have the right social services, in order to have a good policy path, I don't see any alternative to a democratic path. But let's be honest, democratic values and principles are under scrutiny in different parts of the world, maybe sometimes even within European borders. So protecting our democracies, nourishing our democracies is never something that we should take for granted.
Okay.
There's never sort of
And I'll believe that Nigeria is a shining example in Africa, right?
I mean, the 2015 elections, I think, is a very good example to Nigerians themselves, above all, but also to other African countries, that the winner also has to get the power by the end of the day. That is not always a given, as we know, in democracies.
Let's proceed now. When you talk about trade and investment, Nigeria happens to be one of the biggest trading partners with the EU, right?
Yes, I mean,
and when we're talking about foreign direct investment, so far up till date, what's the volume like?
well, I mean, the European Union and Europe in general is by far the biggest market for Nigerian exports. So if we look at the last statistics of trade, we trade together for around 25 billion euros. I think these are the 2016 figures. We are still to see the 17 ones. And if you divide those figures, then you will see that Nigerian exports are 15 out of the 25. So in effect, 50% more is exported from Nigeria to Europe than imported from Europe to Nigeria. And of course, this is unfortunate for the Europeans because we don't make as much money as the Nigerians, but I celebrate it nevertheless because, of course, these kind of exports translate into jobs and opportunities and wealth generation and development by the end of the
A
day.
lot of persons thought since Nigeria is yet to sign the EPA, Economic Partnership Agreement, this will affect the volume of trade between the two.
Yes,
So
and
it hasn't affected?
I've never been able to pass through a single interview in Nigeria without discussing the EPA
is critical.
at one point in time, and I'm very happy to keep discussing it because, seen from our perspective, what is really important is to diversify the economy, to look at the value chains, the opportunities for inclusive growth. Growth is one thing, but having growth that benefit a large proportion of the society is another thing altogether. And that takes long-term policies in order to identify what are the sectors, what are the opportunities.
But do you think Nigeria's stance is on grounds of principle? You just talked about the fact that you have worked with some of the most principled persons in the world when it comes to positions on key issues in the world. Do you think it's on grounds of principle?
No, I think it's a mix of principles, ideology, and to a certain extent, also I think a valid concern of some Nigerians that they would not want to expose industries that are maybe not ready for this for unfair competition. So what we are trying to engage with our partners is to explain that the economic partnership agreement is designed in such a way that there are benefits to the Nigerian side, that they will not be exposed in a cruel and direct way to the markets of Europe, but there is an opportunity to actually build these opportunities and job creation along the way.
Okay, you have done a lot in the Nigerian Northeast region in terms of interventions for the vulnerable. So where are we with it?
Well, the Northeast, of course, is a particular challenge in Nigeria. I think our hearts are sinking when we see the deplorable conditions for many people in the Northeast, caused by the insurgents, of course, caused by the Boko Haram, very, very dire consequences for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So for us, it's important to support the efforts done by the Nigerian government to fight this scourge, of course, to a certain extent, make sure that terrorism is fought directly, but while doing that, also having a long-term perspective. So we engage with humanitarian aid, of course. In the short term, there's a very significant need for food aid, for shelter, for supporting the internally displaced. But at the same time, we are first movers, I must say, in Nigeria, to also say, let's begin already now to look at the long term. Let's see how we can use our development cooperation to see what should be the cornerstones of the development of that region in the long term. And that is where we are engaging now with, I think, around 257.5 million euros in development cooperations programs in Borno, and we are looking now to expand also to Yobe State and other areas to make sure that history does not repeat itself. So this is what we call an integrated approach in diplomacy. This is what my boss, the High Representative and Vice President of the European Union, Madame Mogherini, in her global strategy is calling an integrated, comprehensive approach, where we work on military issues, we work on humanitarian issues, we work on long-term development issues, we work with political dialogue, and we work on trade issues, all combined, because we think that a mix of all of these ingredients will make a much, much more powerful effort. And of course, with the one secret that we should never forget, that our only way to success is to support Nigerian-led initiatives. Not to be prescriptive, but actually to come here and support Nigerian visions and Nigerian policies. Because by the end of the day, Nigerians know best how to lead their own country. So what we can do is to support that, to engage, to lend our experience, and to support it also with development cooperation. And that is what we are doing. There's still a long way to go, but we are really following up on this, and we see it as a key priority.
Okay. Welcome to Diplomatic Ties.
And we're doing our best to make it as convenient and easy as possible for prospective students.
What we can do is just support the efforts of West African countries to integrate, to organize a better regional, political and economic integration.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Diplomatic ties, building friendship and enhancing oneness among nations. Watch Diplomatic Ties on NTA International.
The other challenge happens to be the herdsmen-farmers clash, and in one of the national dailies, which even informed by inviting you to this program, you expressed concern about it. However, you commended Nigeria's president's visits to Benue, Nasarawa, Taraba, the prone areas, and you sustained one position that some decisive steps should be taken by government to really stem it. So are you impressed so far with where we have gone in Nigeria over that?
You know, the situation with the herdsmen and farmers is extremely worrying, and I think for everyone it's clear that the killings that are taking place now almost on a daily basis, if not on a daily basis, it cannot continue like that. It's a human catastrophe going on as we are speaking. So this is why the European Parliament, this is why the European Union and its member states have made statements that are rather strong in expressing our concern about what is going on. And this should, of course, not spiral out of control. And in order to see a peaceful end to this conflict, it will take a redoubled effort from everybody. It will take a very strong engagement. It will take making sure that the perpetrators of violence are brought to justice. Really, impunity will only fuel those criminals, those engaged in these matters, to do even more. So it's vital to clamp down on those. And then, of course, it's vital to look at long-term solutions also. I mean, that is always how it is in diplomacy. I'm afraid you know this very well, managing a program on diplomatic ties. There are very rarely simple, easy, quick fixes to difficult matters. And of course, this goes also for the issue of the herdsmen and farmers. There's a need to look at the economic livelihood of the ways of doing business, how to create alternatives, how to make sure that the ongoing conflicts, climate change and other factors combined with the population growth that we already discussed will not continue to have a negative spiral in terms of ending up in violence. This takes really thinking ahead. I heard a speech by the Vice President when he approached the ECOWAS just a few days ago. And I must say a lot of interesting thinking going on, and I think also very positive that Nigeria has reached out to ECOWAS as a regional organization to engage in this. Because of course there is need for national engagement and national solutions, but while having that, and independently of that, there is need in parallel to have a regional approach also, because some of these matters don't respect borders necessarily. Yeah, right. It goes beyond.
Okay, that leads me to the next point, talking about, because what you're talking about is the transhuman engagement you're talking about within ECOWAS region, right? Now, what about the issue of migration to Europe from Africa?
Yes.
What's the update?
No, thank you very much for raising that, because of course that is on top of our agenda also. And when we look at migration and mobility, I think this is where our partnership has become even more important than ever possibly, because when we see Nigerian sons and daughters being stranded in the desert, dying on the way to Libya, some of them undergoing situations of what can only be perceived as very dire human rights violations. I mean, allegations of modern day slavery as we are seeing it. And I've been speaking to a lot of these people myself. I've seen them, I've met them around the country, in Edo State in particular, and I heard their stories, and I must say my heart sinks and freezes when I hear the stories of young ladies being exploited on the way, and even within European borders. So something has to be done about this. I have noticed that the president of Nigeria has said that it is important for Nigeria to reach out to European partners to intensify dialogue on these matters. He said that at the ECOWAS summit in
Somebody
December.
somewhere raised an idea. I know that somewhere the Nigerian government sent a high-powered delegation to Libya, and a lot has taken place. A lot has been repatriated, and they are going through some kind of checks to be reintegrated into the Nigerian society. Don't EU think about a project, maybe a rehabilitation project in Nigeria, where these returnees could come and this could assist government somehow?
You know, you are knocking on an open door. Because as a matter of
The door
fact,
is open already?
The door is open already. It's wide open, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Because since I mean, we didn't wait for a report on CNN to start moving on this. To be honest, together with the Nigerian authorities, we have been working on this for quite some time. And if we look at the statistics, just since April last year, so in about a year's time, the EU has supported 7,720 voluntary and safe returns from Libya.
Which areas?
And these are, I mean, most of them come from Edo State, some of them come from Delta State, around half come from Edo State. And of course, I work very closely with my good friend, the governor of Edo State, Mr. Obaseki, on looking at how can we find formulas also for his state in particular. I admire his leadership on grabbing the bull by its horns and really trying to find long-term solutions on this matter. What is important, as you are saying, is not just to bring these people home and then dump them somewhere. I mean, these people need a fair chance for a new start. So this is why when they come, the ones that are supported from the European Union, when they arrive to Lagos, then they are given a small startup seed money funding. Together with IOM, we work with them to give them training opportunities, vocational training, you know, opportunities to start new businesses. Some of them are highly stigmatized. Some of them are indebted because they need to borrow money from friends, from families before they are sent. So it's very difficult for them to come back. And I think we must not let them alone in that situation. We must follow up, and this is what the EU is doing. While at the same time, and this is important to say, while at the same time never forgetting the long-term solution also. We can not only just put a lid on the current crisis. We need to look at how is this handled in the future.
In the area of solid minerals, I know the last World Solid Mineral Day, you were very visible, and you made a lot of commitments regarding the fact that the EU will really channel a lot of attention to investing in the solid mineral sector in Nigeria. How far?
Well, I think there's a lot of potential for investment in Nigeria. Again, just like our trade figures, if we look at the overall investments, they are on the increase. So we see more European investors engaging in Nigeria. The mining sector is a case in point. Although Europe is maybe not the biggest player at this point in time, I think there's scope for increasing investments, but not only in that sector. I mean, looking beyond that, the digital sector, I see some very thriving, impressive examples in Lagos and elsewhere. In agriculture, I mean, the potential for modernizing agriculture, having a higher yield, more intensive, more youth-oriented, more business-oriented agriculture. There's huge potential for that. There are other sectors too. Textile has dropped quite significantly. I would be concerned about the number of imports from...
Just that they will say how time flies. I would love to have you on and on and on again, but I don't have all the time. But before I leave you go, there was some support for justice, anti-corruption and drug sector in Nigeria. Where are we with that project?
Well, this is ongoing also. We engage very much with the justice sector. We are trying to support installation of case management systems. We see quite often when it comes to delivering justice, access to justice, it is also about knowing where are the different cases in the system, who are the judges handling them, how many people are there awaiting trial. And of course, when we talk about the issues that we have just discussed, the conflict areas, when we talk about the traffickers, which is an integral part, of course, of the problem on migration, on mobility, all of this can really only be solved if there is a strong and responsive justice system, independent, professional, with the capacity to curb.
But last question, what's your impression regarding democracy in Nigeria, looking at separation of powers and checks and balances?
Well, I think Nigeria has matured democratically in a very short time, which is quite impressive, which doesn't mean that it cannot be perfected. And of course, the next elections will be a very, very key moment to demonstrate the right path towards further consolidation of democracy. And if I may say, making sure that the reforms are in place in time ahead of the election. The best gift we can give to INEC is to make sure that reforms are not done a couple of minutes before midnight, giving them time to make the entire machinery running before that. So this would be my call to the legislators, to the political decision makers, to the political parties. And then don't forget to give some room for your women, for your youth in particular, for disabled.
Ketil, Karlsen, it was nice having you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Appreciate
it's a pleasure.
Yes.
Let me take it. I believe you had it educative. I was highly educated and updated given the line of thought by His Excellency, the head of the delegation to ECOWAS and ambassador of the EU to Nigeria, Ketil Karlsen, who having on and on again mostly close to elections because the EU has done a lot to support the electoral governance in Nigeria to ensure that the next elections will be credible and free and fair to all parties that have interest in the election. That was it on Diplomatic Ties today. Always be guest to the program. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.